This is the Blackprint, where being black is always the topic of conversation. The Blackprint is brought to you by Rhymes and Designs and Good Evil Art. Welcome back to the Blackprint. It's MJ. Last week we talked about Black social mobility and the necessity to reach back. Today we'll be talking about leadership. In addition, we have a special guest for today's show, the executive producer of the Blackprint, Art. With all that's going on in the world, I've heard a lot of people talk about leadership, or I've seen a lot of people who seem to step into the role, into the position, and I think having good leadership, having effective leadership is more important than people who call themselves leaders. So I just wanted to talk about what I think leadership is and what I think leadership isn't. I want to talk about the fact that we're all capable of being leaders. And also I want to talk about this whole myth that I think is pretty prevalent in the Black community, where it's the man's role to lead. It's the man's duty to lead. It's not necessary for women to be in leadership positions. It's kind of like the whole idea of the man running the household. The man is supposed to be at the helm, and the woman is supposed to support him and be his subordinate, and that's just the natural way things go. And there's also the conversation of us needing a specific leader, having limited leadership, and these people are notable and they're easily identifiable, and that's necessary to push the movement forward. Examples of those kinds of people would be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Being a leader is not necessarily a title. It's not necessarily a role. It's knowing what you're capable of and taking the initiative to step into that position to help your community, to push for progress in your community. Everyone is not a voice box. Everyone is not a figurehead. Every role is important to the movement. There's this whole idea that some roles are more important than others, but we all have something to contribute. And if we are all trying our best at what we're good at, then we definitely can be leaders in our own lives. All right, you want to jump in?
What's going on, good peoples? It's your man Art, representing Rhymes and Designs and Good Evil Art. Bull City, Durham, North Carolina representative, East Coast stand up. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I am a writer, rapper, playwright, business owner, lifelong student. If you want to call me activist, I say more so community builder. That's what I do with my life. So for leadership, that's the topic of the day. We touch on a few things. The first thing I want to talk about is leadership in the home, and how we have this conception that women should become, I guess, secondary to a man, and the man is supposed to lead and she's supposed to follow him. And of course, I feel like we should work together. So that's where I stand in that. But then also looking at how important it is to understand how a woman should be the leader. Evidence of that, you got John Brown, Harriet Tubman's husband, who I believe his name was John Brown, who was encouraging her to let's stay on the plantation. You know what I mean? Imagine that strong Black woman, one of the greatest leaders we've known to our community on this continent. Imagine if she had listened to her husband, the leader that we speak about this day. Imagine how that would have turned out. So that's just evidence of that. Then on another note, I heard MJ speaking on who should be leaders and who should not be leaders, and who can be a leader. My thought on that is everybody should be a leader, just like she was saying. But applying your skill, what you're best at, to the community is what I consider leadership. And leadership isn't all about what you're doing for the community. You also have to lead yourself and be a leader from inside and make sure you're doing what you feel like is right for you. And because if you're not helping yourself or leading yourself, then you can't help or lead nobody else. But yeah, that's enough from me. Keep doing your thing, MJ.
Thanks for your wisdom, Art. One of the reasons I think this is a very important consideration, we all believe that we have the ability to take on leadership roles, is because a movement to me should not be about the leader. We've seen this time and time again where these movements have taken off, they've made waves, moving closer to progress and to making change. And there's these few people, and that's who everyone is looking to lead this movement. And then if that person dies or is taken out, then the movement, it hits a wall. It's at a standstill. It's stymied. And that's not what movements are about. You shouldn't be able to cut off the head of the snake and the body stops moving, but that's a snake. A movement isn't a snake. A movement should be more like a river where there are several tributaries. The water is flowing in so many different directions that it will be hard to cut off the flow. So if we all take on these ideas and these beliefs from the movement, and we really consider ourselves to be active members in the movement, it doesn't matter if we have a specific leader. We're still going to push for what we want, what we need. We're going to demand change. We're going to fight for freedom regardless. And if we are looking for someone to delegate, we're looking for someone to represent us, then that person will always become apparent to us. But in the interim, we can't just stop. That's what life teaches you. Consistency is necessary. It's necessary for growth. We can't just stop and hope that someone will show up and then get the ball rolling again. For example, a lot of people like to look to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as being this great leader, which he was, of course, but he wasn't always sure. He wasn't always certain about everything. For example, with his I Have a Dream speech with a march on Washington for jobs and freedom, he wasn't sure that people were going to show up. He was ready. He was prepared to speak regardless of how many people showed up, but he was certainly concerned. But then people took it upon themselves to effectuate change, and 100 charter buses showed up an hour. It ended up being 250,000 people that attended the march, and it was because they believed in Dr. King. Of course, they wanted to see this great man. They wanted to be a part of that moment. But if people hadn't felt like they could have made an individual change, if they hadn't felt like their participation in that moment was important, then what are the odds that people would have shown up at all? So there's a phenomenon in psychology. There's this concept called the Bystander Effect, which I'll get to a little later. I'm going to explain where that came from. In 1963, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered in Queens, New York. So what made this case special was that the attacker came back on 3 separate occasions across a half an hour. And while these attacks were happening, 38 people watched the killer stalk and stab this woman. 3 different occasions. And not one person called the police. The police were finally called after Kitty Genovese was murdered. When these bystanders, these witnesses gave their accounts, they all thought that someone other than themselves would call the police. So that's when a group of social psychologists, they sat there and they contemplated this story and they tried to figure out why that happened. And that's when they came up with the concept of the bystander effect, which is when the presence of others discourages an individual from intervening in an emergency situation. When there's a lot of people around, you don't feel a responsibility to act. Because there are so many other options, there are so many other people who can do what it is that needs to be done. Why does it have to be you? Why involve yourself in this situation? Why take the risk? So I think this, the concept of the bystander effect certainly applies to the current situation that we are in. This is an emergency situation. It's an emergency when people are killed by the police, unarmed or otherwise killed by the police, and there are no actions taken against the police officers. The victims are constantly being criminalized. It's an emergency situation when it's over 1.2 million people who look like you in prison. People are in prison for 20 years because of marijuana. That's an emergency situation. It's an emergency situation when people are living in a city and they don't have fresh water coming out of the pipes, but they have to continue to pay their bill, because if they don't continue to pay their bill, then the state can come in and take their children. It's an emergency situation, but so many people are calling for a leader instead of calling on themselves, waiting for, some superhero to fly in and to take, the reins, because people aren't willing to take on the responsibility. People aren't willing to really fight the real fight that needs to be fought. And so we all end up being in the situation where we're sitting there waiting patiently and active while these attacks are continuously unleashed on our community. We're not changing it because we're waiting for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to show up. We're waiting for Malcolm X. Waiting is not stopping us from being murdered or incarcerated. It's not stopping us from being poisoned. So we can't suffer from this bystander effect. Every single one of those people in that situation should have called the police. No one personally intervened, and no one even called the police. We cannot continue to make the mistakes that we've always made. We are not bystanders, and we're not going to be held back by this bystander effect. We can all, no matter how big or small, contribute to our own progress. And just on a side note, I think it's very important to mention that this story got really big because it was a white lady and the attacker was allegedly a black man. Of course, these are things you have to take into consideration, because we know the media represents us in such a negative and poor light, which is extremely harmful to the cause, because, the media is basically how the masses are educated. So then next I'm going to move on to what a leader is and what a leader is not. In my personal opinion, I believe that a leader is a position of servitude. If you are elected to be the leader, to represent a group of people, you are serving those people. Just the way the police are supposed to serve us, just the way the police are supposed to serve the citizens, a leader is supposed to serve the people. Leaders that make decisions on their own, dictate and delegate, are dictators and tyrants. We don't need dictators and tyrants. We don't need someone holding our hand and telling us what we need and what we don't need and what we need to do and what we don't need to do. We know what we need. We have a voice. But sometimes it's beneficial to put somebody at the helm because it's easier to organize. It's easier to create a plan and actually execute that plan when you don't have a million voices chiming in, when we've come to some kind of consensus. A leader is supposed to represent the group that has elected them to be a leader. And that the word elect is very important. I've seen so many people who have claimed to be leaders taking on these leadership roles, literally taken on these leadership roles, and no one ever elected them. No one said that they could be the voice of the group. No one said that they felt that they were trustworthy or capable or competent enough to take on such an important role. Being a leader isn't about having your voice and getting people to follow you. So when you see people who elect themselves, most of those people are looking for notoriety. They're looking for power. They're looking for control. When you see people who claim to be leaders, that they're supposed to be the head of the movement, and they're not encouraging the people that they're supposed to be leading, the people they're supposed to be representing, they're not encouraging you to think critically, to be skeptical, to question everything, including them, then they don't want to represent. They just want people to follow them blindly. Like I've seen on multiple occasions, people who call themselves leaders, call themselves activists, call themselves, soldiers for the movement, when someone questions their actions, for example, when they say things and then their actions are not in line with what they're saying, or as their, career grows, as their career progresses, they start to do all of these things that are contradictory. What they begin to do is actions that contradict their previous stances. So people question that, and then it's like, oh, you're not committed to the cause. Oh, you're not dedicated. Oh, you think you're intelligent enough to challenge me. You start to hear these attacks when people are questioning, but a real leader will recognize that all of their actions are not justifiable, even if the masses questioning them is not representative of what is actually going on. At least the group of people that you're representing is thinking. At least the group that you're representing is aware of what they want and what they need. And they're not just going to sit there and be led astray, even if they're wrong. A leader doesn't lead to get rich, to get wealthy, to get famous. If someone is saying, I'll give you this information, but you need to give me all of this money, or if you don't have this amount of money, I'll give you this amount of information. Disseminating information, arming your troops with the necessary tools should be the main goal of a leader. That should be a leader's purpose. So why withhold information because people can't afford it? Yeah, we all need to eat. But it's like you're eating off of your people. If you are a valuable resource, if you have something to offer, then you can definitely make money. Does that mean that you need, Benzes and multiple homes and, taking all these lavish trips and you got all the jewels and all the nice shoes and all of these things? Meanwhile, the people who are putting in your pot barely have a pot. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Leaders should be willing to sacrifice, and they certainly shouldn't treat members of their group as being more or less valuable based on how much money they can give to the leader. Like, why is, your constituents, why is their tax bracket something that is of concern to you? There are lots of people who aren't in these high tax brackets, and they're way more down for the movement than people in higher tax brackets. You know what I'm saying? There are people living in impoverished communities that have the ability to change the world. They have so much to offer, so much ambition, intelligence, drive, compassion, integrity, but they don't have any money. One of the things I've seen from so-called leaders in the Black conscious community is, these people, they come out and they say all of these amazing things, and you're nodding your head, you agree with them. You're like, yes, this person has the right idea. Like, let me see what they're talking about. Let me subscribe. It's not abnormal to look to someone for direction or advice. That's normal. That shows a level of maturity when you recognize that you need help and you go and you look for it. But you see these people and they're saying all of these wonderful things, and then there's somebody that comes after them, their disciple, and they get upset because the disciple is not giving them enough credit, or their disciple is getting book deals and, getting these high fees for their talks. And the original, which is absurd, the original, it's like, do you really think that you originated this original thought? We're standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's no shame in that. That's what we should be doing. But for you to pretend like you were the first person to think these things, the first person to do these things, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. And also, why is it so important for you to get credit? If your community is being pushed forward, if you see progress happening, if you have disciples, why is that not validation enough? Everybody these days, they want a book deal. They want likes, they want subscribers, they want all of these things so that they can turn that into money. Is there no value in making people think? Is there no value in sparking conversations? I think being a leader is a really important position. It's a lot of responsibility and no one is perfect. But trying to come up off of your people, that's not a leader. And having a title doesn't make you a leader. Getting interviewed by this anti-Black media doesn't make you a leader. Doing the best you can in the best way you know how, that's what makes you a leader. I'll be ending today's segment with a song from KOTA The Friend called The Way.
Alright, girl, we make some paper, boy.
Da 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 yo. Live my life the way I want. Do my thing the way I want. Live my life the way I want. The way I want. Yo. Mama told me I'm already rich. You don't gotta struggle mentally over the petty shit. A lot of people acting like they tryna win an Emmy, but you always keep a smile and they love you cause you genuine. Got that? Lil KOTA catch me on a podcast. Too true for most. Every day I be at combat. Used to spend my last $10 on a dime bag. Now I'm dropping gems, about to take this shit beyond rap. High school dreams, told you all about the Peace Corps. Told me that they raping other lands for the resource. All about the money in the country where you free, or you dying in the street by the hands of the police. Ain't nothing more ironic than an African Marine on the front line fighting for the capital regime. Living in a system full of demons. I be looking to the heavens trying to figure out a reason, but I never do.
Live my life the way I want. Do my thing the way I want. Live my way the way I want. The way I want to.
Lil KOTA on the way soon, picking up the pen more, laying off the gray goose. Legend in the making, everybody better make room. Real or fictitious, I just hope he like Jesus. Lil boy showing them the way, that's the real joy. Gotta see the bigger picture hiding in the film noise. Hoping he don't see me trying to raise him as a killjoy. When he being bad, gotta take away his lil toys. Lil fool, welcome to the earth. Not a lot makes sense and it's getting worse. But I believe in you, and I'll be watching as you seek the truth. I never had a lot of faith, but I got a lot of faith in you. I got faith that you can break the news, and I'ma shoot them down quick if they ever try to aim at you, so you can focus on the things that you came to do.
That was KOTA The Friend with The Way. So that was part one of our talk on leadership. I hope you all enjoyed it. I would like to thank our guest, Art, for stopping by and providing his insight. If you have any questions or suggestions as to what we should talk about in the future, go ahead and drop a comment in the comment section. Please tune in for part 2 next Monday. We'll be getting into the nature myth, and I'll be sharing a few thoughts on leadership from some of our most notable leaders. Also, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with friends. That was the Blackprint, and this is MJ, sending you love, peace, and ammunition. Thank you for listening.